Hello, scholars. Good day. I am Dr. Twyla Williams, and I love research. Welcome to today's session on qualitative ethnographic design. We're going to talk about this a little bit. It is not a design that's used often in dissertation work, but seasoned researchers use this all the time. And so we're going to talk about it so that you can just have some context of what it really means when you say you're going to conduct an ethnographic study. So as doctoral students, understanding the nuances of ethnographic research, it can enrich your toolkit for investigating cultures, communities, and even social interactions. Ethnography goes beyond the conventional theory and hypotheses kind of setup. It immerses you, I guess I would say, in the lives of your subjects, allowing you to explore the complex social phenomena from within a culture. Today, we'll dive into that ethnographic design, the theoretical foundations, data collection, methods, analysis, and practical considerations for your research. So let's get started. First of all, what exactly is ethnographic research? Well, ethnography is a qualitative design, as we know. It's rooted in anthropology and it aims to explore and describe cultural practices, beliefs, social interactions, as I said before, of a particular group or a community. Researchers deeply engage with participants in ethnography and spend quite a bit of time, extended periods of time in the field, observing, participating in, and immersing themselves in the actual cultural context of what they're studying. And this immersion allows the ethnographers to produce that rich, textured, description that can only come from being immersed in it with yourself and those personal interpretations of social life as it is experienced by those who are in the community. And so in this type of research, you have to be a part of the process. And that's why it's not really as well suited for dissertation work. Not saying it can't be done, but this is a type of design where you need to really be a part of the community or such of what you're studying. And so when we talk about the theoretical foundations of ethnography, there's a couple of things that we want to make sure that we understand that underpin those theoretical foundations. First of all, we need to think about cultural relativism. What's relative about the culture? At the heart of ethnography, that's the principle that we always come up with, that cultural relativism. And it encourages researchers to understand the cultural practices and the beliefs that are within their own context rather than imposing those external standards, but what's in that particular context. This fosters a deeper comprehension of the social world when looking at employing the design of ethnography, and it keeps your mind open. A second underpinning for the theories within um, ethnography would be interpretivism. Sometimes I mess up with that word, but ethnography is often, it's guided by an interpretivist view or paradigms, which emphasize understanding human behavior through the meanings and interpretations that individuals ascribe to their actions. This is in contrast to a positivist type of approach that we seek that actually measures measurements of data objectively. And so it's the opposite of that. We also can think about reflexivity when we're thinking about the underpinnings in ethnography. Reflexivity, it's a crucial component here, as you can only imagine, because researchers must continually reflect on their positionality, their biases, and the influence on the research that may or may not have, and what that process looks like for the participants. So having this awareness will foster, again, that transparency piece that's so important for different designs, and it will help you with your critical analyses within the research. Another thing that we can talk about when we're speaking about ethnography is the components that need to be addressed when we're designing the study. One thing that we need to think about is defining the research questions. And so this is a little different in the sense of we start by formulating a clear research question that focuses on a particular cultural group, or practice. Okay, and that's why those research questions are a little bit different. You need to ensure that your question allows for exploration of a deeper meaning, social interactions, and practices when you're making these particular research questions for ethnography. Another thing is selecting the site, very important. We need to choose a research site that is relevant to your study and that you can access. Accessibility here is key. You need to consider such places as schools, workplaces, communities, or specific events. Your site should consider, or you should think about, can you actually be immersed in that environment? Do they facilitate that? Do they allow for observation of the cultural practices, or is that a private practice that they don't allow outsiders in? So these are all things you need to seek to understand when you're getting a site for ethnography. Gaining access. I talked a little bit about that. It's key. You can't do ethnography if you can't have access to the particular site or environment or culture that you plan to study. And so you need to, in order to increase your chances of that, you have to build rapport or have some rapport or some kind of trust with that community or group. It's essential for you to be a part or to get that in order to do an ethnographic study. Again, because if you don't have access, and even once you get access, you need to have that trust factor built up in there, because you won't be accepted within that environment if you don't do the work beforehand and make sure that you have some rapport. This often can involve getting with or engaging with the key people in that culture or informants, having them to give you entryway into that and introducing you, community leaders allowing you to come in, gatekeepers, making sure that these kinds of people are in the loop to help facilitate you getting entry into the group. Data collection methods for ethnography. That's something we gotta always talk about, is that for ethnographers, they use a variety, of course, for collecting data in ethnography. Participant observation here is really number one. You would think we would say interviews. We've been saying that the whole time we've been talking about designs. But for ethnography, actually the number one collection method is participant observation. That's what you're there to do. And that's when you engage with the community in the daily activities. You observe social interactions, rituals, cultural practices. That's your job, to observe and watch participant observations. And then we can come back with some interviews and do some informal, semi-structured interviews to gather some further insights about maybe beliefs or practices or lived experiences to help enhance that. But the observation is number one. Another thing in ethnography is we need to think about our field notes, very important data source for this design. We need to document our observations, reflections, interactions throughout your research process to capture the context and the nuances of the community. So those are very, very important. So when we think about that, when it comes to data collection, then there's also some things that we should consider when we are looking at the data analysis piece for ethnography. Thematic analysis, again, can be employed, and that starts by you organize those field notes, the recordings or transcripts that you have. You identify recurring themes, patterns, categories, codes, themes, and that will just emerge from that data. And this process might involve coding qualitative data to highlight those significant points so that you can bring those out. We can also use narrative analysis. Ethnographers often use narrative analysis to reconstruct the stories and share the voices of the participants. We talked about this a little bit in phenomenology, so that's a similarity here. We highlight the individual experiences and within the broader cultural context, and how those personal stories interact with the cultural practices. Okay, and so that's what we do there. And then lastly, we can think about with analysis is that reflexive analysis. We can reflect on your role as the researcher, how it influences the data that you collected. Consider how your own identity, your beliefs, and your perspectives might shape your interpretations of the data. And so those are some considerations for data collection. Now, there are some challenges to ethnography. It provides some really rich insights, but we can also have some unique challenges with it. First of all, it's a time-intensive process, as I spoke to you before, and this does not lend itself to necessarily dissertation work, but it's great for research in general. Ethnography requires significant time commitment for immersion in the field that you want to study, and you need to build those relationships, again, that take time and collect that data. And so you need to be prepared for some extended periods away from other academic responsibilities if you're going to do an ethnographic study, because you have to literally be immersed in that environment. There's some ethical considerations because navigating those ethical dilemmas is crucial. You have to ensure that you have informed consent, anonymity, and that you have the well-being of your participants at the forefront at all times. And sometimes having to just go through that process hinders your ability to really get rich data because they know who you are, you're in their environment. And so sometimes you might not get really a true reflection of what's going on because of that. That's a limitation or a weakness that you can talk about when we're talking about ethnography. And we also have to be very careful of the power dynamics when we're doing an ethnographic study. What are the cultural norms within the community? And we have to make sure that we adhere to those because we definitely do not want to be offensive in any way. Another thing that might necessarily maybe be a challenge is that, that subjectivity piece. Ethnographic research, it's inherently subjective. And so reflexivity can help to kind of mitigate that bias and maybe prejudices, but researchers have to recognize the influence of their interpretations on the research outcomes. And so that subjectivity piece, you need to really, really be mindful of that here because it can have some other implications. And so when we're presenting ethnographic findings, there are some things that we can do to make sure that that's done in an effective manner. First of all, descriptive richness. Use some very vivid, descriptive language to bring your research to life. Paint a picture of the community or the cultural practices you studied, allowing readers to experience the context through your writing. We always want that to come through. Your participant voices, you need to include those direct quotes, narratives from participants. You want to amplify their voices and perspectives in this type of study. And this will add some authenticity and depth to your findings, okay? And then lastly, when thinking about the findings, we need to think about that contextual analysis. We need to situate our findings within the broader socio-cultural, historical, and theoretical context, okay? And so this helps us to advocate for the relevance and significance of our research within the field, okay? And this helps to, again, kind of mitigate that subjectivity and give some more backing for the rigor related to ethnography. So in conclusion, qualitative ethnographic design, okay, qualitative being the method, ethnographic being the design, it offers a very powerful framework for understanding cultures and communities from an insider's voice. You get to go in and you get to be the one reporting it and being a part of it. And by immersing yourself in the lives of your participants, you use your reflexivity, you gauge in detailed data analysis, you can provide some really meaningful insights to contribute to the knowledge in your field. So thank you for joining me in today's discussion on ethnography. I hope that this session has provided you some understanding, a little bit more of ethnographic research, design, practical applications related to it. Again, I am Dr. Twyla Williams. Until next week.